Bert.
We're going to now resume.
Thank you. Mr. Lund, I wonder if we could have the document back up on the screen. Financial profiles for 2007. Yes. Mr. Grout, I think we were at page 53 of this document. This page begins an analysis of top production tier in the halibut fishery, and then it goes on to middle production tier and lower tier. I'm just going to deal with the first and the last. Under the top production tier, do you see the individual vessel profile set out, the landings in pounds, 90,000 pounds, other ground fish total, vessel price, etc. Gross revenue is set out, and then there are a number of expenses set out. Fuel, $11,250. At sea monitoring, $7,000. Offload monitor, $2,000. License, $15,000. Then quota lease, $82,944. Do you see that's by far and away the largest expense that's borne by halibut vessels as a result of the ITQ system?
Yes, I do see that.
And put that in proportion, 82,944 for the quota lease. If you go down a little bit more, under net revenue, the crew and captain shares are listed there at 139,230. So the quota leasing charge would be what the owner of the ITQ receives effectively for signing a document leasing out his quota. Is that as you understand it?
I presume so.
And the 139,000 is what the crew and the captain make for a lot of hard work out in the fishing grounds. Is that as you understand this analysis?
I'm sorry, what was that question?
139,000, that figure under crew and captain shares, is the income earned for active participation, a lot of hard work and exercise of skill, judgment, etc. Correct?
Well, it appears the amount on that row is as you state.
And then 2 pages over, we see the profile for the bottom production tier. These would be the smaller vessels. May well be the type of vessels found on the west coast of Vancouver Island and other remote communities. But here we have the landings, etc. The quota lease charge here and under this profile is $13,824. And the crew and captain shares 21,000. The various vessel expenses have to come off that, and the earnings right at the bottom, that's earnings before tax and depreciation, 13,433. So the actual earnings of the active fishermen on the bottom tier are less than the armchair fishermen owning the quota and leasing it out. Do you see that?
No, I don't see that. You have to point that out to me.
So the quota leasing charge, 13,824. Do you have that?
Yes, I see that.
And then follow down that column right to the very bottom, earnings, EBITDA, which I believe is earnings before taxes and depreciation, 13,433.
The comparison you're asking me, you'd want to look at the analysis of the individuals that did not fish and leased out their their quota and compare that, a similar table as this one, to the individuals that do that to make the comparison. I would not make that comparison by looking at the earnings relative to the leases here. There'd be other expenses associated with the individuals leasing out their quotas that you'd need to account for in making the comparison you're asking about.
Well, there can't be very much in the way of expense in holding a piece of paper evidencing a quota, is there?
Well, you'd have license fees associated with the halibut license. I presume they might have some fees related to insurance. Not sure about moorage or any of those other items. I don't have that specific information. All I'm pointing out is if you want to make that comparison, you'd want to see that laid out in a similar table.
Okay. And you haven't seen that laid out in a similar table, I gather. Is that correct?
No, I have not.
And that's been the case ever since you began to recommend use of ITQs, is that correct?
I'm not clear which question you're asking me.
Well, your recommendation or your comments relating to the advantages of ITQs that you've given evidence of here are made in the context that you have not looked at a socioeconomic analysis of the effect of ITQs.
Well, your questions have been directed to the halibut fishery. We do have information on the demonstration fisheries we've done for salmon. It's not in the level of detail that's shown here for the halibut fishery, but there is information that we have on to the extent that we were able to get it for some of the demonstration projects that were reviewed, and some of those exhibits are in evidence, including the Gardner Pinfold review in 2008 and the Giselson study of the 2006 troll demonstration.
But the demonstration fisheries do not carry a price for quota with them, do they? In the sense that the quota isn't auctioned to those participating in the demonstration, it's simply given to them, isn't it?
In the demonstration fisheries, all of the license holders are provided an equal share of the TAC in the demonstrations we've done.
Yes.
So each license is provided an equal fractional share. So if we look at the Seine fleet, for example, with 169 licenses, everyone's given 1 over 169, 1/169th.
Yes.
In terms of the arrangements that might be made in terms of moving shares between vessels, those are the department's responsible for the reallocations that are made and the paperwork associated with that. The business part of that transaction is done among the license holders.
Yes.
In the reports I cite, where individuals have been interviewed, there's information that's not laid out in the sort of analysis that Mr. Nelson has done here with the halibut fishery, but there are examples of, for example, prices that have been paid to lease quota from other vessels in those demonstrations that are documented in those reports.
Yes. All right. Is it fair to say that well, let me put it this way, you're familiar with the expression first generation and subsequent generation quota holders, in the sense of the first generation being those who are granted quota, and subsequent generations those who have to buy it from the first generation quota holders?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. The first generation quota holders basically receive a windfall economic gain through receiving quota basically free. Is that fair to say?
Well, I can say that the initial allocation of quota has been contentious in a number of fisheries, and there's been different arrangements put in place in terms of how those initial allocations might be granted. In terms of the salmon demonstrations we've done, we've had agreement from the fleets that we've worked with that it should be on an equal basis among the license holders.
But equal basis, yes, but not sold to the to the license holders is given free by the department.
The department, in licensing these demonstration fisheries, is providing a share of the TAC for the year in the conditions of the license.
Yes.
In a competitive fishery, where there is not an ITQ being planned, the same license is providing for an unlimited share of the species in question when the fishery is open.
Yes. All right.
In both cases, the licenses are a privilege that allows the license holder to access the resource for the year bounded by the dates and the license and conditions.
Well, I'm not going to ask the question a third time in the interests of time. While we're on this report, I think it may be useful to go back to page 34. There's a section on the salmon troll sector. Just more or less noting that this exists here. You see, this is page 34 up on the screen. The second paragraph reads, in the troll fishery, vessels range between 35 and 50 feet and are generally crewed by 2 to 3 persons. That's correct as far as you're aware, is that right?
Yes, I think the employment can vary, but
Yes.
generally accurate.
And the next page, or page 36, please, Mr. Lund. The second bullet point on that page reads, the ITQ program in the north, area F, allows vessels to lease Chinook allocations, obviating the need for those fishermen on the fence to go fishing in order to earn income. That's correct as far as you're aware?
I'm not sure entirely what's meant by the second half of that sentence, but the ITQ program allows for reallocations of Chinook to occur, and arrangements for leases could be made between license holders.
Well, while we're there, you see the reference in the next bullet point, the winter Chinook fishery in Area G, featuring small surpluses during poor weather months, is unattractive to many vessels not based on the west coast of Vancouver Island. That's a reference to the fact that the Area G fishery has been structured in a way that the annual TAC is divided up into periodic allotments so that the fishery continues throughout the winter. Is that correct?
Small amounts of the harvest have occurred in the Area G fishery in the winter. The majority occurs in the spring months and late summer.
Yeah, but Area G is nevertheless a competitive fishery.
That's correct.
And the Area G Harvest Committee is overwhelmingly in favor of continuing it as a competitive fishery. Is that correct?
That's been the indications we've received from the Harvest Committee, yes.
Yeah. On the next page, Mr. Lund, it's the final reference I'll make. The third bullet point under key assumptions reads, a quota lease charge of $5,000 is assumed for all scenarios. This reflects the Area F fishery, where vessels may lease Chinook on or off at a rate of about $20 per fish. So is that about the going rate and the market for quota leasing, as you understand it?
There is a specific reference to the lease rate, at least in the 2008 fishery for Area F, that's at my tab 37, which is the Gardner Pinfold report. And on page 15 in that report, it cites a quota cost of about $22 per fish.
Yes, all right. So that is the cost that the person utilizing the quota has to pay to the person not participating but leasing out the quota. Is that right?
The way you've characterized that question presumes that the person leasing the quota is not fishing. It's possible the person may have fished part of their quota, so it's it's not a given that somebody has to lease their entire quota. They could lease parts of it.
In the Area G fishery, at present there are 100, well, let me ask you this first about trolling itself. You've said that ITQs slow down the fishery. Now, trolling occurs with these vessels putting down their trolling poles at about a 45-degree angle on each side of the vessel, moving slowly through the water, dragging lines with hooks and lures. That's how it works? They move fairly slowly through the water?
Sure, yeah.
When a fish is caught, the hook has to be brought in right away because
I know it sounds like I might be objecting to that, and I'm not. But I just want to point out, I don't think this document's been entered as an exhibit. It's been referred to extensively. I'd suggest it should be made an exhibit.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you.
483.
When a troller catches a Chinook or coho on a barbless hook, it has to be brought in right away and dealt with, or else it gets off the hook, obviously.
That's correct.
That type of fishing is not slowed down by an ITQ program, is it?
Well, in our demonstration fishery reports, we do have some evidence that the nature of even troll fishing can change. In a competitive fishery, for example, for sockeye, in the reports, I might refer to the 2006 report that was done by Gord Gislason in June of 2007. It was at my tab number 40. He talks about the potential for trolling in a competitive fishery to be bringing fish in quickly. You're trying to maximize the number of fish you catch when you're out there. Conversely, if you're working to a specified share of the catch, there might be opportunities for you to increase the value of those fish you're catching by doing some additional dressing of the fish or improved handling of those. I believe it's that report that cites an example of that.
And just for the record, that's Exhibit 467.
Do you happen to know Mr. Gislason's experience with trolling?
Mr. Gislason is, I believe, an economist.
Yeah, thank you. The Area G fishery is structured with 165 licenses, is that correct?
Yes.
63 have been inactive in the past 2 years, is that correct?
Is there a specific spot you can point me to for that statement?
Well, I think I'm referring to your affidavit in the Area G litigation over the mitigation fund. Do you not recall that?
Well, it sounds like it may be approximately correct.
Right.
I've seen a lot of documents in the last while,
Right.
so
Well,
that's why I asked.
that's all I need is an approximation. Of the 63 inactive, 14 are DFO inventory licenses bought back under either the ATP or the PIC fee program for transfer to First Nations.
Sorry, that's you're asking if there's 14 Area G licenses in inventory?
Or something like that.
I can't speak to the specific number from memory. I'd prefer to refer to it.
The New Channel have requested those licenses repeatedly, but have not been granted them. Are you aware of that, or should I direct those questions to a licensing person?
I've not been working directly with New Chalmette.
All right. But the structure, if an ITQ program were put into effect, the 63 inactive licenses would receive a share of the TAC as an ITQ, would they not?
In the demonstration fisheries that we've been doing in the other fleets, in the demonstrations to date, we have provided an equal share to all of the license holders.
Yes. So if they chose to remain inactive, as they may well do, they would lease their quota to the active fishermen.
I made the point at the time, but maybe I'll make it here as well. The inactivity of some of those license holders may differ from year to year. So individual license holders may be making decisions on an annual basis on whether they go out and fish or not.
Yeah.
So the statistics you're referring to that I provided elsewhere were summary statistics, and they may not be the same vessels from year to year that are making decisions on whether to fish or not. In a competitive fishery, every license has an eligibility that, and they can make a decision on whether they participate in the opening or not.
So, is the philosophical divide that you mentioned frequently a divide between inactive license holders who would like to have some income, notwithstanding their inactivity, and those who are active and would prefer not to bear the expense of leasing quota?
I'm not sure if I have information that I can characterize the opinions and ascribe them to whether the license holders may be active or not. I think certainly for active fishermen in competitive fisheries currently, some of those fishermen may be good competitors. And one of the concerns that's been raised is if they're fishing to a share, they wouldn't be able to use their skill to catch more fish than others.
All right. On the subject of socioeconomic analyses, I asked my junior yesterday to key in socioeconomic analysis and ITQ in the Ringtail database for this commission. And the only document which came up when he did that was a document which I've emailed around this morning, and I'd asked Mr. Lund to bring it up. It's a document entitled Socioeconomics of Individual Transferable Quotas.
Mr. Commissioner, I've not seen this document yet. If I could have a moment.
I think that's appropriate that Mr. Timberg have the time to look at it. It was circulated as soon as we've received it, and I haven't yet canvassed with Council for Canada whether they have a difficulty with this matter being presented to the witness. I don't know if Mr. Harvey's able to dance around that and cover other ground. Thank you.
I'll dance around it. Thank you. I'd like to ask Mr. Grout if do you have a binder there with the Area G documents in it? I'd like to just refer you to and mark some documents in this line. First of all, at tab 8, a document by EcoTrust. Now this, I'm assuming Mr. Harrison will not mind me using a document produced by one of his clients. EcoTrust have done an analysis here of the effect on ITQs, and it begins by stating under the graph, individual transferable quotas are being promoted as a panacea for global fisheries. However, analysis of BC fisheries raises serious questions about this new economic approach, and it then deals with a number of things. I think in the interest of time, I'll not be able to deal with them in any more than simply skipping through. This is an analysis, though, which uses BC as a case study. Are you aware of this analysis, Mr. Grout? Or were you aware of it before it was produced?
No, I saw it for the first time when I received the exhibit.
All right. Well, I'll just skip through the headings. On the third page, there's what is called lesson number 1. ITQs promote leasing, not ownership. States it is often stated that ITQs provide fishermen with a secure asset which confers stewardship incentives. By owning a financial stake in the fishing quota, fishermen have an incentive to maintain the value of this secure asset through responsible fishing practices. That's the theory. In reality, ITQs have not promoted ownership by active fishermen in BC. Rather, ITQs have promoted absentee ownership and quota leasing. Once vessel owners are gifted their initial quota, many subsequently retire or cease to be active fishermen. Instead of fishing, these armchair fishermen earn income from the proceeds of quota lease fees. And by way of example, a pilot ITQ fishery in northern Chinook salmon, almost half the quota was leased from 2005 to 7. Unlike several other jurisdictions, such as Alaska and Atlantic Canada, there are no owner-operator rules in BC restricting or even regulating the ownership, leasing, etc. Then it mentions the halibut fishery. And you see in the paragraph dealing with the halibut fishery, it says that in 1993, 19% of the quota was temporarily transferred from one vessel to another during the year. Fishermen lease quota by temporarily transferring the ownership of quota. By 2008, the ratio skyrocketed to 106% of the TAC, evidence of high levels of leasing. Today, lease fees are effectively charged on almost every pound of halibut quota in BC, and I think it makes the point somewhere here that that makes the BC industry less competitive internationally. On the next page, high cost of leasing. If we just go down, there's a paragraph there beginning, however, by far the greatest volume of leasing is motivated by lucrative quota lease fees. In some cases, processors even lease and then sublease quota, passing on all the costs to fishermen. Working fishermen are increasingly becoming tenants who pay exorbitant rents to landlords or sea lords who own the quota. The lucrative leasing has in turn driven up the price of purchasing quota, making ownership prohibitively expensive for many fishermen. That, I take it, is something you did not consider when you were giving your evidence about the benefits of ITQs?
I think that's one of the important considerations in terms of how ITQs are designed. ITQs are intended to reduce the number of vessels that are out trying to access the fish.
Yes.
So by nature, there are a reduced number in most of these cases of vessels going out to harvest the resource. Overall, in terms of cost to the fishery as a whole, when you have reduced vessels chasing the same number of fish, it makes for a fishery that's more efficient. But the points you're raising about the costs of leasing quota are some of the important considerations in how the systems are designed. But
yes,
that's one of the understood outcomes of the shift to more of a share-based management approach.
Yes. Is the fact that the number of vessels is reduced through ITQs, is that something that makes the management by your department easier?
Well, we have seen, to use a specific example in 2010, and unfortunately I don't think I can provide specific information in terms of an exhibit, but in the Seine fishery, where we have 169 vessels, when the fishery was open, we saw far fewer than the full fleet going out on any given day. On the reports I was seeing this summer, it was usually in the neighborhood of about 30 vessels out at any given time.
Yeah. So is the ease created by ITQ something that does that account for why the department appears to be pushing ITQs on the industry?
I think there's a number of challenges around the management and implementation of share-based approaches. It certainly gives the department greater certainty that harvest targets will be achieved in a more precise way. The fisheries have been open longer, though. There's requirements for the department to help manage reallocations around quota. We've also had to be involved in the monitoring and compliance from the enforcement perspective. So there are different costs, I guess, associated with the management of these fisheries.
If we go through this document, the lesson 2, is mentioned, ITQs give fishermen a false sense of security. Lesson 3, ITQs facilitate privatization. Lesson 4, ITQs increase capitalization. And this, Mr. Lund, if we could just look at this page, the box on the left indicates the relevant costs, the capital that's devoted to licenses and quotas in green and vessel and equipment in blue, giving an idea of the capital intensivity of this system of management. The next page, the lesson number 5, quota leasing hurts the financial performance of working fishermen. I think we've dealt with that. Lesson 6, ITQs don't enhance sound science and monitoring. I mentioned high grading problems and other things that go with ITQs. Lesson 7 is ITQs have safety problems of their own, which is interesting. The top paragraph on that page there beside the graph, the page beside the graph, reads more seriously, the high cost of buying and leasing ITQs bleeds income away from working fishermen, causing boats to go out with inexperienced or insufficient crewmen, which can lead to accidents. At a 2007 Fish Safe BC workshop, quota fisheries issues and too few crew on vessels were identified as 2 weaknesses among many that need to be addressed to improve fish safety. And then finally at the bottom of that page, the 8th lesson, lesson 8, sound science and co-management underpin fisheries sustainability. It makes the point that ITQs cannot prevent overfishing, etc. As I say, I can't deal with all that, but I take it that this is material that you had not, and I think you've said this, you were not previously aware of.
That's correct.
Could this be marked, please, as the next exhibit?
Exhibit 484.
And just so we can mark it, if we go back to tab 4, there's another document entitled Marine Policy, the elephant in the room, the hidden costs of leasing individual transferable fishing quotas. This also is a local study, in the sense of a BC study. I think it's by a person from Simon Fraser University, and it deals with similar problems associated with ITQs. Were you aware of this document, Mr. Grout?
I had a look at it when I saw it in the exhibits provided.
That was the first time you looked at it, is that right?
That's correct.
Could that be marked, please, as the next exhibit?
485.
67 is a document entitled Framework for Improved Decision Making. It's also in our binder at tab 3. This has been referred to before, of course, as it's exhibited. I note that on page 4, there's a reference to the Auditor General having noted that the department needed to improve processes for consulting with the province and stakeholders and communities. That's the second paragraph to the bottom. And towards the end of this paper, there's a reference to a pilot project. This is at page 20. A pilot consultation project set up. It's page 20 of the document. See the paragraph at the bottom states the Department of Fisheries and Oceans is committed to move forward in a more coordinated ecosystem-based approach to the management of fisheries and oceans resources, consistent with the spirit and intent of the Oceans Act. Therefore, on a pilot basis, the Department will support the development of a multi-partite local management body in the west coast of Vancouver Island. Primary goals for area-based multi-stakeholder bodies should include, and they're all set out. And then there's reference in the next page to the West Coast Vancouver Island pilot. That's the West Coast Vancouver Island Aquatic Management Board, I think. Is that correct?
Yes.
That board involves, among others, First Nations, particularly the New Chalnoth First Nation. Is that correct?
I don't work directly with the board itself.
All right. There's a document in the binder it's at tab 9 of the binder, titled Industry and Coastal Communities, Socioeconomic Review prepared for the New Chalnoth Tribal Council by S&H Consulting. Have you seen that document before?
No, I haven't.
At the let's see, this is third page in, page 0004. Page numbers at the bottom of the page. There's reference, there's a section dealing with adjacency principle and accessibility. There's a quote there from the Oceans Act. Whereas Canada recognizes that the oceans and their resources offer significant opportunities for economic diversification, generation of wealth for the benefit of all Canadians, and in particular coastal communities. And then on the next page, it deals with the area-based aquatic management board. And there's quite a discussion here about that I won't go into in the interest of time, the creation of the Aquatic Management Board as a consultative body, including communities and First Nations. Wonder if that could be marked as the next exhibit, please. The department doesn't pay much attention to this board, I expect.
No, I'm saying that I'm not the departmental expert on the Aquatic Management Board.
All right. Okay. You were asked, and this relates to the operation of this board. You were asked about earlier today about the $30 million that was provided by the U.S. for a mitigation program. You recall that?
Sorry, you're asking if I recall the discussion earlier today?
Yes.
Yes.
And I think, if I can summarize it, your explanation, the U.S., a large part of the Chinook off the west coast of Vancouver Island and the west coast of the Charlottes is bound for U.S. rivers.
I don't believe I made that statement this morning.
All right. Well, are you aware of that fact that 72% of the Chinook, I believe, off the west coast of Vancouver Island are U.S. origin Chinook?
I haven't spoken directly to that evidence. It wouldn't be accurate to state necessarily that that's the case in the northern troll. I know that at certain times of year there can be high proportions of U.S. origin populations in the west coast of Vancouver Island fishery.
All right. But at any rate, in 2009, by reason of an agreement under the auspices of the Pacific Salmon Treaty, a 50% reduction in the TAC in Area G was imposed by the department. Is that correct? Approximate 50% reduction in TAC of Chinook.
In terms of the agreement, there was a 30% reduction in the total Chinook harvest in the west coast of Vancouver Island ABM fishery. The department then applies the allocation policy, and it did result in a larger reduction in the Area G fishery based on priorities for First Nation, food, social, ceremonial fisheries, and recreational fisheries.
Yes, the overall 30% reduction was applied only to the commercial sector, leaving the First Nations, food, social, ceremonial, and recreational sector harmless. Is that correct?
In that particular year, in any given year, we're going to be applying the allocation policy and determining the harvest amounts for each of the groups.
All right, well, assuming the FSC and recreational continue to have a priority, the U.S. requested reduction and the agreed reduction will be applied only to Area G commercial trawlers. Correct?
Again, that's not entirely accurate. Depending on the year, there could be a situation where we have to look at reductions in the recreational fishery, and possibly in the event of very low abundance, even in the First Nation fishery.
All right. But we've gone through, we're into the third year of the reductions, and there have been no reductions to any sector other than Area G so far, pursuant to this international agreement.
That's correct.
And in return, the U.S. provided $30 million for a mitigation program, correct?
$30 million was provided by the United States.
Yes. And the West Coast Vancouver Island Aquatic Management Board was tasked by the department to come up or to recommend a program for the use of that $30 million, correct?
I was not the lead on the development of the mitigation program or the use of the funds.
All right. But you are aware that the community reps on that board, the First Nation reps, the processing sector reps, and the municipal and regional district governments, together with the Area G fishermen, came up with a consensus that the funds should go to the Area G fishermen who had suffered the reduction in order to assist them in restructuring.
Mr. Commissioner, if I can just interrupt for a moment. This issue that Mr. Harvey is pursuing on cross-examination is a matter that's been litigated in the Komodo litigation, and there's been a decision rendered in the BC Supreme Court. It seems like he's relitigating that matter here, and I question the relevance of it to the terms of reference with respect to this commission, with respect to Fraser River Sockeye. So I'd perhaps ask him to remain focused on what's before us in this forum.
Well, I thank Mr. Timberg for reminding me of the focus. It was the only correction I make is that it was the federal court that rendered the decision in the Komodo case. But the relevance is as to the consultation process. I just want to establish, Mr. Grout, that the consensus of the West Coast Vancouver Island Aquatic Management Board was rejected by the department.
Again, I was not the lead in the consultation process or the evidence or information that came from that process. You'd be better advised to direct your questions to perhaps Mr. McGilvery or one of the members of the policy group that were involved in that work.
I'd like Exhibit 470 brought up, and this is the final one that I'll be dealing with. This document at page 006, Strategic Plan for Salmon Management, 006, there's a paragraph relating to Area G, and this gets back to the ITQ, but it's relevant to the mitigation fund and the consultation. Area G, it says, this is a highly polarized fleet divided into those who believe that fishermen should have to actively fish their allocation to benefit and those who support an ITQ approach. The elected Harvest Committee is dominated by the former group and has rebuffed any attempt by the minority to discuss demonstration fishery options with DFO fishery managers, despite of the results of the survey. Reducing the size, and this is the sentence I want to ask you about, reducing the size of this fleet through Pacific Salmon Treaty Mitigation Program may cause the fleet to reconsider. Now, reducing the size of the fleet through the mitigation program refers to the fact that the DFO wished to use the $30 million, apart from $1 million for the modernizing the allocation policy, wished to use the balance of the $30 million for the purpose of extinguishing troll fishing licenses, not only on the west coast of Vancouver Island, Area G, but also in Area F and Area H. Is that correct? And that's what that refers to in that sentence?
This is a piece of a discussion that occurred around potential prospects for the various fleets in the future.
But reducing the size of the fleet through the Pacific Salmon Treaty Mitigation Program refers to the DFO's program of using the bulk of the $30 million to reduce the size of the troll fleet.
The context of the discussion here was looking at future potential for share-based management. We had some survey results that indicated that roughly half of the fleet might be interested, roughly half of the license holders might be interested in having their Harvest Committee discuss share-based management approaches with the department. If the fleet composition changed in the future as a result of a reduction under the mitigation program, there might be different perspectives on whether they wanted to proceed or not.
So the department is using the $30 million to reduce the size of the Area G fleet in the hopes that that will bring them around to accepting ITQs?
No, the 30 million mitigation was announced as part of a package that the minister announced to reduce troll licenses as part of a reduction in the Chinook harvest that occurred on the west coast.
Mr. Grout, the communities and the processors and the other marine interests and the regional districts in the west coast of Vancouver Island have not been consulted with specifically with respect to ITQs, have they? They're not included in the consultative body that is considering the department's ITQ proposals.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the list of individuals and groups?
Communities and communities in the west coast of Vancouver Island, local governments on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and the processing and infrastructure interests on the west coast of Vancouver Island.
I'm probably not best positioned to provide that answer, but I know Mr. Katawaki, in his capacity of Director of Pacific Fisheries Reform in 2005, did extensive consultations around the province around Pacific fishery reform. I suspect some of the individuals and groups you mentioned were in attendance at some of those meetings, but I can't speak to the specific details.
Are you aware that the communities, and specifically the First Nations communities in the west coast of Vancouver Island, are very much opposed to both the ITQ proposal and the fleet reduction proposal?
I'm aware of the views of First Nations as they pertain to ITQs.
As being adverse?
I'm aware that a number of First Nations have concerns about ITQs.
Yes.
My friend would like to enter this into evidence today. I will object to that for the following reasons. The rules require 7 days disclosure of any documents used for cross-examination. This morning, I was provided with a new document from Mr. Phil Eidsek, and he had the courtesy of sharing that with me, and one from Ms. Brenda Gertner, who also shared that with me. Those two documents I will not be opposing that they be tendered at the last minute, contrary to the rules. This document that Mr. Harvey is seeking to have tendered was not provided to me until the middle of the afternoon in the midst of the hearing process. So I've not had a chance to speak to my witness or to get any instructions as to any potential prejudice contained in this document. But my submission will be that there's prejudice to the hearing process, as it's going to cause delay, and it will encourage last-minute disclosure of documents if he's permitted to enter it at this point in time. So that's my position. In the event you would like to proceed with this document, I'd ask for an adjournment so I could speak to and have leave to speak to my my witness about this document.
Yes, if there's any prejudice, I won't push it at this time, but it may be that we'll see Mr. Grout again. I would like to at least have it marked for identification at this stage.
Yes, I was going to suggest, Mr. Timberg and Mr. Harvey, that it be marked for identification purposes. And if Mr. Grout does return, then perhaps you can either follow that Mr. Harvey can ask his questions, and Mr. Timberg will have an opportunity in re-examination to follow that through, or renewed submissions could be made with respect to its relevance in this proceeding. So could that document be brought up, Mr. Lund, so that we can make sure we're talking about the right document? Is this the document that you're talking about, Mr. Harvey? No.
No, I'm sorry.
And this is Mr. Commissioner, this document was circulated by email this morning from Mr. Harvey's associate, and the indication on the email was that it would go to members on a commercial panel, one of these prospective panels, as opposed to this witness. So I know it's gone out electronically to participants on that footing. I don't know if we have an electronic copy here.
Yes, it's on the screen.
Oh, thank you.
So if we could mark this document, socioeconomics of individual transferable quotas and community-based fishery management, as the next letter exhibit for identification.
It'll be S for identification. S.
Mr. Commissioner, the next participant is Area E and the BC Fisheries Survival Coalition. Mr. Eidsvik.
Good afternoon, Mr. Commissioner. My name is, for the record, Philip Eidsvik with the Area E Gillnetters and the BC Fisheries Survival Coalition. And I just want to say for the record that I'm not counsel, and I think that I haven't said that, and I've been treated like I am, and I appreciate that. But I just thought it was important to get on the record that I'm not a lawyer, and I'm a fisherman by profession. Do we usually take a break at 3:15, Mr. Commissioner? Okay. Mr. Grout, I'm wondering, how many fish can a seiner catch in a day?
That would depend on a number of factors.
Such as?
It would depend on perhaps where they're fishing, the abundance of the populations in the area, those sorts of variables, number of sets they're making perhaps, local abundance of the fish.
So in this year, you said we were down to roughly about 30 seiners from a 165 Area B licensed seiners. Is that correct?
That's correct. I was just giving a rough approximation of the number of vessels I was seeing reported out operating on a given day during the fishery.
And do you know how many people work on each seiner?
The crews can vary. I was out in Johnson Straits this year, and it you see reports in the past of maybe 4 to 5 on a vessel, but it looked like on a number of the boats there were maybe more than that this year.
So if we go 165 times 5, we're about 825 people working on the same boat normally? If you look at the Area B fleet total?
Well, typically, I don't think we would see all of the licenses out on a given opening.
So you're saying that even now, prior to the ITQ, there was fewer vessels?
Yeah, there were certainly licenses the department's holding in our inventory would not be out participating in the fishery, and for a variety of reasons, not all of the eligible license holders are going to show up at any given opening in the past.
So prior to the government DFO acquiring these licenses, if we go back to say, let's go back to about 1996, you've been around for a while, how many seiners would we have seen on a Fraser River opening?
Actually, 96 was before my time with the department.
Oh, so you don't know how big the fleet was prior?
I don't have specific numbers with me. I know over the course of the buybacks at that time, there was about a 50% reduction in the fleet as a whole, including all gear types. I don't know the specific seine numbers.
Okay, so say if there was a 50% reduction in seine, so from 96 we went from 165 times 2 is 330 licenses, then we dropped to 165, and in this year, very big Fraser sockeye year? Fair to say this year,
yes,
2010?
extremely
And we
large.
dropped to 30, so we've gone from about 300 vessels to 30.
No, I wasn't making that statement. I was commenting on how many vessels were out on any individual day. I wasn't commenting on the total number of vessels in the fleet that might have been active over the course of the fishery.
Oh, so do you know how many vessels would have been active out of that 165?
I have that information in my office, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head.
If the fleet was to go IQs, what would the seine fleet look like in 10 years?
I think it's tough to project what might happen. We've had 2 demonstrations with the Area B fleet, and really they were almost 2 extreme conditions. In 2008, they fished for 2 days, and they caught, I just have the number for the B, D, and H harvest together, but it was, I think, about 15 or 16,000 in 2008. The seine fleet fished for 2 days. Very few of the vessels went out. In 2010, it was quite a large fishery.
In other words, DFO hasn't done a study to project what the fleet would look like 10 years from now if individual transferable quotas were introduced.
No, we have not.
So when the department is saying that there's certain instability, it may be certain instability for the people who are left after the fleet has cannibalized itself, but not necessarily for the people now sitting on the beach, because there's no more boat fishing.
In terms of and I can maybe take you back to the discussion paper on Pacific Fisheries Reform. On page 23 in that document, it does talk about transferability and what the potential might look like in the future. I think one of the points we make there is that in the competitive fishery, as it stood in 2005, there were quite a poor financial situation, and there was a need for further reduction in the fishing fleet, even in the absence of some of the other pressures. So, present harvests and levels of abundance of the fish could not support the fleet that was there. So one of the potentials of reforming the fishery was a potential reduction in the fleet.
So the fishery was pretty well heavily reformed in 96, 97. You said about a 50% reduction across the fleets. Any promises made by the minister about the future of the people that were remaining after fleet reduction? 96, 97, did you ever hear any things like it's not a sunset industry, the fish will be there for the people who remain behind, that sort of stuff? Did you ever hear those promises and commitments? Certain instability?
I can't speak to the specific words you're using.
So no comment on those words at all? No comment that the minister made assurances or promised there'd be better fishing opportunities, new areas opened?
I can't speak to the specific words the minister was using at that time.
But you're confident on the IQ plan that will indeed bring certain instability to the people that are left?
One of the intentions of the plan in looking at the demonstration fisheries is looking to see if that can be improved with the demonstration approaches we're looking at.
I guess this is maybe why some of the fishermen are a little bit troubled. Because have you ever heard the fishermen saying, well, promises were made by the department but not kept? And now again, of course, there's been promises made about certain instability, and they're thinking, geez, can I trust the department that time? Have you heard those types of comments from fishermen?
Well, I've certainly heard concerns from fishermen that they don't necessarily trust the department. I wouldn't characterize the items laid out in the vision for reforming the Pacific fishery as promises. It's laying out, as I said, a vision for the future of the fishery. And we've been using demonstration fisheries to explore how some of these things might work.
So if the vision at fleet reduction, though, was certainly instability, you can say that that certainly hasn't happened from 1998 to this year, 2009?
In terms of well, sorry, maybe you could rephrase your question.
If there were promises made by DFO to sell fleet reduction, were you aware fleet reduction was pretty controversial?
Yes.
Okay, so if the department made promises that it was good things would come out for the people who stayed behind and stayed in the industry, that hasn't happened in the last 10, 15 years. Since 97, I guess, was when area licensing was introduced.
Well, there were significant concerns at the time. The coho conservation concerns were a substantive one. There was a recognition that the fleets were too large for the available harvests. That was one of the drivers behind reducing the number of boats in the fleet.
So
certainly the abundance of salmon is, as a natural resource, is something that fluctuates from year to year.
and
The thinking was that by reducing the number of licenses, you would reduce the number of boats chasing after the resource available, but we've seen with Fraser sockeye reduced abundances since that time on average.
okay. So we've seen, take the optimistic, generous view, good intentions by the department, as you said in the 2005 fisheries reform paper, good intentions, but people shouldn't put too much weight in them because things can happen, such as conservation issues.
Yeah, we're harvesting a natural resource and there are fluctuations from year to year. So as part of the vision, we're looking at ways that we can look at structuring the fishery to give the license holders ability to self-adjust to those conditions.
Okay. When do interior coho start to run up the Fraser River? What we call
Typically, depends where you're fishing, but typically you'll see some entering the river in August and then into September and October.
And what part of August? What part of August? Early August, mid-August, late August?
I don't have a specific run timing curve in front of me, but we do implement in our fisheries management plan a window closure in the Fraser River to try and protect the coho migration, and that's typically implemented beginning around the Labor Day weekend. There will be some coho migrating prior to that, but the majority of the run comes after that point.
And how long has that closure been in place, that Labor Day weekend closure? Can you remember?
How many years?
Yeah.
I'd have to
Might be
look back at the plans.
Might be before your time, maybe? So maybe before you took over and assumed a role in salmon management, prior to 2002? Was it in place in 2002?
I'd want to look at our management plan to check.
You talked about the cost of fishery management and then the necessity of that DFO is going to have to continue to download some costs on the fleet. Can you fill me in a bit on why this is necessary? Because I think the DFO budget is still about roughly the same every year, or has there been pretty major cuts?
I'm not an expert on the overall DFO budget.
So you just know there's a necessity to download costs out of the fleet, though.
There's certainly some drivers around improving the confidence in the catch estimates, for example. The fleet is deriving a benefit from the resource, and one of the elements of Pacific fishery reform is to have mechanisms whereby the fleets, as deriving income from the resource, are paying for some of the costs associated with that.
So you talked about LaRock, I guess, has had an impact as well on the flexibility of DFO to, say, use fish to finance the department. Is that correct? Or scientific work? Now, I'm not asking you to comment on what this means, but has any fisherman ever raised the British Columbia Terms of Union to you, Term 5E, which states Canada will assume and defray the charges for the following services: protection and encouragement of fisheries. You ever heard of any fishermen ever raise that?
No, I have not.
I expect the lawyers here will be familiar with it, but I raise it to your attention today, Commissioner, because I don't think it ended up in the legislative framework that was submitted to the Commission, and I think it's a really important item that we can have great debates about as we go along, I expect. The value of a Fraser River sockeye is an interesting issue. How much did seine vessels get paid for it in Johnson Straits this year? Any idea?
We typically get that information from Mr. Gord Gisselson, who does a report on the value of the harvest from the previous year. We typically would get that in March or April of the season following the fishery.
Can you tell me how much a seiner would have got for a sockeye in 2008 when they had a fishery?
We probably have that information.
You don't know off the top of your head?
I don't recall off the top of my head, no.
How much Fraser Gillneder would get for sockeye off the top of your head?
No, I don't have those numbers handy off the top of my head.
How much a processor would get for one at wholesale if they sold it to the Superstore or Fresh to Japan or anything?
No, I do not.
How much a retailer would sell for a customer? A salmon to a customer?
I don't recall the specific prices, no.
So I guess I can say that economic considerations in the management of the fishery aren't that important if you don't know the price that's being sold? Or am I being unfair
Raising
here?
the prices for specific purposes around our allocation framework, for example.
I'm sorry, I missed that?
We'd be using pricing information around the allocation framework exercise, which is what I'm familiar with.
But-
In terms of economic performance in the fishery, we've tended to use catch as a proxy in a number of our analyses.
Mr. Commissioner, I note the time. I wonder if I might suggest the break at this point. Thank you.
Here, we'll now recess for 15 minutes.